The Statue of Liberty, a monument to an idea. Part 1. Born of a dream, forged in fire. It began not in America, but in France. The year was 1865. The American Civil War had just ended, and across the Atlantic, a young French law professor named Édouard René de Laboulaye was celebrating the Union's victory and the end of slavery. A passionate supporter of democracy and admirer of the U.S. Constitution, Laboulaye had a vision: to build a monument that would honor liberty, celebrate America's centennial, and symbolize the friendship between France and the United States. But his dream wasn't just about America. Laboulaye had deeper motives, political ones. France, under Napoleon III, was not exactly a beacon of democracy. Laboulaye hoped that by celebrating American freedom, the French people would start to yearn for liberty themselves. So, a statue was born, not yet in shape, but in spirit. To bring the idea to life, Laboulaye turned to a brilliant, eccentric young sculptor, Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi. Bartholdi was obsessed with colossal statues. Years earlier, he had proposed building a giant lighthouse in the form of an ancient Egyptian woman at the Suez Canal, an idea that was rejected. But now, with Laboulaye's backing, Bartholdi found the opportunity to build something even more dramatic. Something that would tower above New York Harbor and announce to every ship arriving, "You are entering the land of the free." He envisioned a woman in a flowing robe, inspired by the Roman goddess Libertas, holding a torch of enlightenment and a tablet inscribed with July 4, 1776, the birthdate of American independence. At her feet, broken chains, symbolizing the end of oppression. But the journey from vision to reality would be anything but smooth. Part 2. Designing a Giant. From the very beginning, Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi didn't just want to build a statue. He wanted to build a colossus. Something that would rival the ancient wonders of the world. A monument so massive, so commanding, that it would become eternal, impossible to ignore, impossible to forget. But how do you give physical form to something as intangible as liberty? Bartholdi knew he wanted to represent Libertas, the Roman goddess of freedom. She would be cloaked in a flowing robe, noble and calm, not a warrior, but a dignified sentinel. In her right hand, she would hold a torch, raised high, a beacon to the world. In her left hand, a tablet inscribed with the date July 4 MDCCLXXVI, the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And beneath her feet, broken chains, barely visible to the public eye, symbolizing the end of tyranny and slavery, a subtle but deliberate nod to abolition, still a fresh wound in the post-Civil War United States. But it wasn't just the symbolism that made the statue revolutionary. It was its scale. Bartholdi envisioned her standing over 150 feet tall, made not of stone or marble, but of copper. Why copper? Because it was lightweight, malleable, and it would naturally weather into a beautiful green patina over time. But working with copper on that scale had never been attempted before. To shape her outer skin, Bartholdi employed a technique called repoussé, an ancient method of hammering metal into shape from the reverse side. Huge wooden molds were built, and then copper sheets, some as large as a dining table, were hand-hammered to match each curve and contour of the statue's form. But there was a problem. The statue's shell would be thin and hollow. It needed something to hold it all together. Something strong, but flexible enough to withstand the violent winds of New York Harbor. Bartholdi was a sculptor, not an engineer. He needed a partner. A genius. So, he turned to a man who had just finished a little project called the Eiffel Tower. Part 3. Gustave Eiffel's Hidden Hand. Frédéric Bartholdi had a problem. A big one. He had crafted the body of liberty, the skin of hammered copper, the elegant lines, the symbolic form, but it was just that, a shell. Beautiful, yes. But it couldn't stand on its own. It would crumple in a storm, twist in the wind, or simply fall apart from its own weight. What he needed was a skeleton. A frame strong enough to hold up over 200,000 pounds of copper, tall enough to rise over 150 feet in the air, and flexible enough to sway with the wind, not break against it. But in the 1870s, such a structure had never been built before. Enter Gustave Eiffel, the man who would later change the world skyline with a tower in Paris, but who, at the time, was already a pioneer of metal engineering. Eiffel was famous for his bold use of iron in railways, bridges, and structures that defied traditional architecture. Bartholdi approached him with the problem. A statue that needed to be both featherlight and hurricane-proof. Eiffel didn't flinch. He loved a challenge. But he also saw something deeper in the project. For Eiffel, this wasn't just an engineering job, it was a chance to prove that art and science could create something immortal. Nut and bolt the genius within. Eiffel and his chief engineer, Maurice Koechlin, developed an internal iron skeleton unlike anything the world had seen. Instead of building a solid column, they designed a central iron tower with dozens of metal ribs radiating outward, like the spokes of a wheel. These ribs would support the outer copper panels from the inside, using a system of metal saddles and flexible armatures. What made this truly revolutionary was its flexibility. Rather than resisting wind, the statue would move with it, swaying gently, sometimes up to 3 inches in either direction. It could also expand and contract with heat, like a living organism breathing in copper and steel. Eiffel had turned a hollow sculpture into a piece of functional architecture. And though Eiffel would later become world famous for his own tower in Paris, many engineers believe that the internal design of the Statue of Liberty was his greater achievement, because it required a harmony between two opposites, a sculptor's dream and a physicist's precision. Bartholdi's statue wasn't just a sculpture anymore. It was an engineered miracle. By 1884, the statue was complete, in Paris. Liberty stood tall in a courtyard, fully assembled, towering over rooftops. Parisians came to marvel at her copper glow, her serene face, and the wild idea that she would soon be taken apart piece by piece, and shipped across the Atlantic. But in America, things weren't going as smoothly. Part 4. A Gift Without a Home. In 1884, the Statue of Liberty stood tall, but not in New York. She was complete, majestic, and glowing with pride, in a courtyard in Paris. Fully assembled, she dominated the skyline for a brief moment, before being prepared for the journey of a lifetime. Bartholdi stood before her and imagined how she'd one day rise from the waters of New York Harbor, welcoming ships and immigrants to a new world. But across the ocean, Lady Liberty didn't yet have a pedestal to stand on. France had kept its promise, gifting the statue. But the United States was expected to provide the base. And in 1884, the U.S. government was not interested in spending a dime. Congress refused to allocate funds. New York's elite shrugged. Newspapers mocked the project. One editorial sarcastically suggested placing the statue in Central Park where no one could see it. The excitement in France was met with apathy and resistance in America. So what happens when a nation is given a gift it can't afford to unwrap? You turn to the people. Package, the pedestal war. A pedestal needed to be built on Bedloe's Island, now Liberty Island, a former military site in the harbor. But the foundation alone would cost $100,000, nearly $3 million today. Fundraising began, but progress was slow. Wealthy donors stayed away, suspicious of foreign projects. That's when Joseph Pulitzer, yes, that Pulitzer, took a stand. Pulitzer, the fiery editor of the New York World newspaper, launched a campaign to raise funds from everyday Americans. He promised to print the name of every single donor, no matter how small the gift. And the people responded. A 7-year-old girl from Brooklyn sent 60 cents. A group of orphans pooled together $1.35. Thousands of immigrants, shopkeepers, dock workers, farmers, and schoolchildren mailed coins and bills, not because they had extra to give, but because they believed in what the statue represented. In just 5 months, Pulitzer's campaign raised over $100,000, entirely from the public. The pedestal was saved. Bartholdi, hearing the news from Paris, wept. America had wanted the statue, they just needed to be asked the right way. Anchor crossing the Atlantic. With the pedestal underway, Bartholdi began dismantling his masterpiece. 350 individual copper pieces, labeled and packed into 214 shipping crates, were loaded onto the French naval ship Isère in May 1885. The journey was treacherous. The ship encountered rough seas and was nearly lost, with Liberty's disassembled head, arm, and torch in the hold. But Isère held together and sailed into New York Harbor on June 17 to a hero's welcome. Thousands lined the docks. Fireboats sprayed arcs of water. Cannons fired salutes. Bands played patriotic songs. America had finally accepted her gift. But there was still work to do. The pedestal wasn't finished, and now a mountain of copper needed to be reassembled. It would take 4 more months. Workers toiled through the summer of 1886, carefully mounting each copper panel onto Eiffel's iron skeleton. It was a colossal jigsaw puzzle. One mistake could ruin everything. But piece by piece, Liberty took shape again, this time rising over 305 feet above the water. A statue that had been born in dream, forged in fire, and nearly abandoned, was now ready to stand forever. Part 5. The Day the World Stopped. October 28, 1886. New York Harbor stood still. The air was electric. Boats crowded the water. Flags waved from rooftops. Schools were closed. Factories halted. For the first time in American history, an entire city stopped to welcome a statue. It had taken over 20 years from concept to creation, and now Liberty was finally ready to rise. President Grover Cleveland, who as New York's governor had once vetoed state funding for the pedestal, now stood on Bedloe's Island to officially dedicate the monument. He gave a short, solemn speech. "We will not forget that Liberty has here made her home, nor shall her chosen altar be neglected." Then, with the pull of a rope, Bartholdi himself unveiled the face of the statue. A moment of silence. Then, an explosion of cheers. Sirens, bells, cannon fire. Liberty, with her torch raised high, stood not just as a sculpture, but as a promise. More than 1 million people participated in the celebration across the city. Party Popper, a nation in awe. The naval parade was enormous. Dozens of ships decorated in red, white, and blue circled the island in salute. Sailors climbed riggings and waved to crowds. People leaned from tenement windows to catch a glimpse. It was a celebration unlike anything the city had seen, a blend of old-world pageantry and new-world ambition. Down in Lower Manhattan, on Broadway, something unexpected happened. When a group of stockbrokers threw ticker tape from their office windows in celebration, they accidentally created the first-ever ticker tape parade, a tradition that would go on to honor astronauts, presidents, and champions for more than a century. Globes showing Europe-Africa what the statue meant. But the biggest moment came not on the day of the unveiling, but in the days and years after. Because as the statue stood tall at the mouth of the harbor, something began to change in how people saw it, especially those arriving in America for the first time. Ships from across the world carried immigrants by the thousands, many fleeing war, famine, or persecution. For them, the first glimpse of America wasn't the skyline or the streets. It was a towering woman with a torch. To them, she wasn't just Liberty. She was a mother, a guardian, a welcoming hand. They gave her names in their own languages. They wrote about her in letters. They wept when they saw her. She became, for millions, a symbol of hope, that here in this new land, a better life was possible. That's when the statue truly came alive. Part 6. From Iron Lady to Icon. When Liberty first rose above New York Harbor, her copper skin gleamed like a new penny. For nearly 20 years, she sparkled in the sun, a golden figure with a flaming torch visible for miles. But over time, something happened. The copper began to oxidize, reacting with the salty sea air. By the early 1900s, Liberty had turned a pale green, the soft patina we now recognize instantly. Some protested. "Paint her back," they cried. But scientists argued the green layer protected the statue from corrosion. In the end, nature decided. Green would be her eternal color. But that wasn't the only transformation. As decades passed, Liberty evolved from a gift between nations into something far greater, a symbol shared by the entire world. Globe showing America's a beacon for the world. In 1903, a bronze plaque was mounted inside the pedestal, inscribed with a poem by Emma Lazarus, originally written to raise funds for the statue's base. "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." Those words would give the statue new meaning, not just as a symbol of liberty, but as a promise to immigrants, to dreamers, to those cast aside by their homelands. Between 1892 and 1954, over 12 million immigrants passed through nearby Ellis Island. Many saw the statue just before being processed, nervous, hopeful, wide-eyed. For them, Lady Liberty wasn't political. She was personal. She was the first American they ever saw. Dove, Liberty in War and Peace. During World War I, the statue stood watch while U.S. troops shipped out from the harbor, many glancing back at her as the last piece of home. During World War II, her lights were dimmed to avoid enemy detection, but she remained an icon in war posters, stamps, and military recruitment ads. For prisoners of war and Holocaust survivors, the Statue of Liberty became a symbol of what freedom could look like, a vision worth fighting for. When the Twin Towers fell on September 11th, Liberty was again there, standing silently through the smoke, covered in ash. Her torch still alight. Her message unchanged. She never spoke. She didn't move. And yet, she comforted millions. Hammer and wrench, reinvention and restoration. Over the years, Liberty has been rebuilt, repaired, and reinforced. In 1984, for her 100th birthday, she underwent a massive renovation. Engineers replaced her torch with a replica, installed a new glass flame, and reinforced the structure. In 2019, a new Liberty Museum opened nearby, offering immersive experiences and a close-up view of her original torch. The statue has even been digitally scanned for preservation, ensuring that no matter what happens, storms, wars, time itself, Liberty can be recreated, remembered, revered. She has appeared in films, books, music, and political speeches. She has been a symbol of civil rights, women's rights, LGBTQ+ rights, and freedom of the press. In every generation, someone has found a way to see themselves in her. Because she doesn't belong to a single moment. She belongs to all of them. Part 7. What Liberty Still Means. She was born from revolution, shipped across an ocean, and raised by immigrants. She stood through world wars, welcomed millions, and faced everything from hurricanes to hate. But she never flinched. Never folded. Never faded. Today, the Statue of Liberty is no longer the tallest. She's not the newest. She doesn't boast flashing lights or high-tech gadgets. And yet, she still moves people to tears. A compass in changing times. In a world of noise, polarization, and constant change, the statue stands as something steady. Something pure. She doesn't sell a product. She doesn't endorse a party. She simply holds a torch. A light in the dark. A symbol of promise. A reminder of who we want to be. When you walk up to her pedestal and look into her face, calm, determined, compassionate, you're reminded that liberty is not a guarantee. It's a choice, made every day. She represents not just the freedoms we enjoy, but the struggles we endure to protect them. Scroll a message etched in copper. Tourists come by the millions, from every corner of the earth. And they don't just snap a selfie and move on. They pause. They reflect. Because they know what she means, or they feel what she means, even if they can't describe it. She is the story of immigrants, the child of revolutionaries, the dream of poets, the icon of protesters, the pride of veterans, and the hope of the oppressed. She is both historical and eternal. Bartholdi never imagined how far her image would travel, into textbooks, tattoos, comic books, postage stamps, even outer space. But maybe Laboulaye did. Maybe he knew that if liberty had a form, a face, and a home, she could outlive tyrants and transcend borders. And she has. Glowing star, the eternal flame. In the end, the Statue of Liberty is more than just a gift from France, or a work of engineering, or a tourist destination. She is a reminder, carved in copper, framed in steel, and crowned in stars, that no matter how dark the world may seem, someone, somewhere, is still holding up the light. And as long as she stands, so does the idea she carries. Freedom. Welcome. Courage. Hope. Not just for Americans. For everyone.